So we're setting up for this easeful hips practice. That's the name of this sequence, is easeful hips. So you're sitting directly in front of a bolster, which is tilted up on a flat block and a blanket on top of the bolster. You want to have a rolled up blanket, and it's under either the crease of the knees when your feet are together, knees out in Baddha Konasana, or it's under your calves. And I can't think of what is the best option. You'll have to sort it out by putting your belt in a loop around your core, around your low hips. And then how about getting the buckle near you? And near a hand's reach. So maybe close to the upper leg. And it's any leg. You get two choices. And as you kind of shimmy the belt so it's low enough, and so it won't be pulling your lumbar spine, I want you to start to cruise the back onto the bolster, and then if you start to gather your awareness in your back and it feels kind of grippy, slide the blanket in closer under the knees. And it is a different sense without the blocks under the legs. And now it's a slightly intense position for the hips. So if the belt is secure and you feel like you want to try to tighten the belt, I would go on the opposite and just kind of let it be secure but comfortable, nothing that's pulling your skin. And as you lie back, the waistband is relaxing. You can put your sand across the intersection of the ribs, right here where the ribs intersect, and you can actually feel their kind of openness in this position. And that might be what you prefer, is to be without sand. So you have a choice to work with the sand, which, since the spine is in this slant, that may make the sandbag holding slightly tenuous. You can work with the reach of the sand across the waist, or you can have it higher up. And then as you allow the arms, and if you have two sandbags, you can have one on each inner thigh. Bring the arms to a moment of reach behind you. Feel if you can lift them up so they're suspended up from the ground. And they're a little more than hovering. So there is some muscle in the arms that is required just to hold your arms, lifting them. And then feel how you reach out of the chest. I want this to be clearly identifying with your chest and your breathing cycle. And then as the arms start to lower down and they're almost settling on the floor, feel where the muscles in the shoulders, in the arms, such as the biceps. And then once the arms are heavy, they may not even feel heavy when they touch down. They just simply allow you to recognize the movement of the ribs as you breathe. So let's settle in and let the breath make space. The belly rises, massaging the organs. And the intercostals are in motion. So with or without the sand on that core body, you can try it without the sand and experience enough with or without. Feel the space in the mid-body. And accepting how much you fill up your core container. And if you have a felt sense of the breath in the landscape of just the middle, like the thoracic chamber, or if it feels like it almost spreads to the corners, right? So it feels like the breath goes from the mid body and it spreads right to the edge of maybe the collarbones. And then what's left out of those breathing spaces are appendages. And what's interesting about these shapes is that we place the appendages often in a shape to return the circulation back to the heart and the lungs. So we're using our placement of our limbs to support that circulation potential. And this is a back bend pose, right? It's a chest opener. It's a restorative back bend. It's generally considered more of a head above heart pose, even though they're fairly uneven territory, but that's the awareness. Give a few more moments. The arms are heavy, the shoulders are centering. And what does it feel like for you to maybe slide your arms a little downwards? Maybe you prefer to keep them motioning slightly open. To breathe in 4 counts. And relax the breath out for 5 to 6. Now, if you have a sandbag across, remove the sand and take the left arm across the chest, reach with the right hand to the left elbow and see if you can guide that arm so it's moving in towards you versus just across you. And maybe even place that right hand so it massages a little bit above the left elbow. So you're massaging down from the left shoulder into the circulation from the shoulder down to the elbow. So it's not necessarily just a deltoid experience, although that's a pretty big piece there. But the full swath of muscle. So I would try to push into the fingers. So you have a nice grip with the fingertips, or even just that slant of not necessarily the tips of the nails, but just below that, and massage all the way to the elbow. So you feel muscle in that space. It'd be a pretty reasonable focus. If the left arm starts to kind of lose its grounding because you're not pushing at the elbow, you just feel how your arm crosses this way in the chest. And then switch sides. Let the right arm cross, left hand to the right arm. So I guess take away the idea of just the elbow. And you might find one side kind of rolls a little easier. You can almost feel that arm reach towards the floor on one side. These I have little differences, and familiarity with my shoulder up eases across. But there might be other spaces that you will feel the tenderness. So start to move with your fingers. And if it's a little bit awkward, then kind of get a sense of touching your upper side of that arm from the shoulder down towards the elbow and feel the tissues in there, the connective tissues. See if you can apply that touch and motion, which equals circulation. Right, so across, sliding. So you are kind of pulling out of that upper back sheath. Okay. Now release that right arm down, unbuckle. And we're going to bring the left foot to step down and the right foot to cross over the left knee so that the ankle can just hook on the knee or so forth. I mean, the ankle is probably a little bit over the other side, but we're simply keeping it hooked so we have more of that open channel of the right knee. And then get a ball or a block, or if you have a towel, you can also push that in next to the left upper thigh. And then press the item that you're using, smush it into the upper outer left leg, the greater trochanter, and you're gonna lean your leg over to into that object. So for many of us, it might be a ball. And if the blanket is kind of bothering you under the legs, you can always slide it out. It's not going to be a necessary prop, but it's just there. So if it doesn't bother you, leave it. But now we take the arm piece and we reach with that left hand to the right knee. I imagine your legs are farther downstream than you're used to with this pose, since we started with a blanket under the legs. So feel if you can adapt to that longer reach with the arm. And the right arm stretches maybe back, and perhaps you need to keep it beside you. So feel the meditative focus that we're beginning to consider internally. And as you elongate with your breath, it doesn't have to be the body parts that are fully elongating to the most massive stretch, but it's the breathing potential. And the breath might feel like it goes in long kind of streaks of movement. Maybe you have a mental visualization that it goes in a circular pattern. So those are kind of interesting things to consider with breath, kind of tuning, right, internally. Because I think that's all internal, unless your breath is all external, it could be so. So I'm holding onto the knee to feel the hip. So I don't have to have my right arm back to work with that. So you might have your arm beside you, but feel where you hold the knee that you're kind of drawing that leg over towards the left, right? It could be to the left, it could be towards you. It's going to be a blend of those two movements, right? So keeping the emphasis for slowing down into that right hip. Yeah, does your right foot circle? Is it pretty stiff at the ankle when you're in this shape? Does it feel like mobility in the foot is even possible? You might kind of sort out some of these areas that are affected. And then as you let go of the knee, shift the legs back to the center and uncross. If you have a ball or a block, you'll put that between the knees or wherever you can reach it, that it's between the two limbs, and you're squeezing into it. Now the ball has, right, some ability to be pushed into different than a block, but naturally you'll feel resistance because of the object being squishable. So as you squeeze in, maintain that pelvic flooring of kind of solid support. Okay, and then remove the ball or block and take the left ankle to that right knee and the ball to the outer right thigh, and let your body weight and all these little things you might start noticing. Oh, what happens to my right foot? Or should I let it turn out? Or, you know, try to keep it where it's as simple as possible and you're not finding it necessary to make extra special choreographic moves. It's like the simple needs of the structure. And the right hand to left knee, if the guidance of the knee is across over towards the right, that could be helpful for your left hip. But for some of us, it's going to be kind of a blend of whatever you can sort out in your hip in the moment. So you're holding the knee and you're just drawing it across, maybe a little towards you. It's a medley. It's a hip medley. Left arm can stretch back or it can stay beside you. Give it a few moments. This is a strong hip practice today. And so if that area is, you know, not getting a lot of walking, right, you might start to feel it. Trying to get it mobilized here. Some good circulation to the hips. Now the weight into that ball, if you have the ball or block, I think it's important to notice if you're letting your body weight kind of sink into it versus trying to hold it up from the ball, like trying to stiffen up so that you don't smush it. Try to just let your body surrender its weight. That's kind of an interesting concept in some moments of our day, not necessarily rounding our back and dropping into our phones, but feeling the opportunity in these chest openers. And now that left arm needs to come down at some point soon so you can stay with the upper leg parts. Okay, what we're going to flow right into is our side sage. We're going to just go right into the good stuff. So when you take away that grip on the knee and you unwind, I want you to keep a hold of the ball if you have it nearby, so you already have it in hand. Slide the belt away and then make the movements real easeful. So my back has had some of this open quality, just lying on the props. So when I roll to the left, I want to turn, and it's hard not to be kind of stiff when you move, and sometimes you want to let your spine have its motion when you come around to sitting on the side. But take the bolster and just pull it off your block, okay? Keep the block though on that other side because you can use it for your hand. So you might as well just keep it overhead. So we got a blanket, and then the one that was at the foot, we'll take that and probably unroll it into a quarter fold. Unroll it, and not roll it up again. Okay, so I've got my sand. I'm going to use this for my side, for my costals. And as I put the ball to the inner right leg, I find this to be very helpful in, it's kind of buoyancy for the hip. It's kind of interesting. If you do this enough, you'll create all kinds of ideas of why you're doing it, but to rationalize. But when you're leaning here, you'll have the sand, and it can be on the upper. If you're not using sand, it's no big deal. You'll follow the same guidance principles, but just be without weights, and that's fine. But when you're leaning down to that left side, be supportive of your head. So if this blanket flat is too low and you're kind of feeling like you're doing the rounding of your back this direction, then just add the blanket height a little bit, fold it up. And then as that right arm goes over to the block, you have a couple heights to work with your block, but finding that tenderness in the upper ribs, which connects closer to your lungs and your heart. It just feels like when you get higher up into them, when you inhale, you're kind of right at the brink of the breath. So explore when you're at the brink, and when you let the exhale empty the lungs, that you have the opportunity to kind of pause at the end of the exhale. And then feel if you sort out your bones. Now, most important for the group is probably to sense the pose pattern, right? Where am I supposed to be with my bone structure? So you're working with simplicity and fullness in the side sage. So you're leaning on the left hip on the ground, and your body weight is lifted but resting into the bolster. So if you happen to use a round bolster instead of this flat one, that might allow you to surrender your weight into it in a different way around the ribs, because it pulls the rib cage. Since it's all rounded pieces in the body, I mean, there are like, maybe if you were to hold on to them, they have a little bit of solidity to them, but they are internally in this rounded shape to hold all those organs inside. So explore your options with your bolster, with how the ball is placed on the inside of the right leg, and then come into the side sage and sense that your brain is comfortable. right? Not necessarily your mind or your thought process, but the actual piece that's at the top. Okay. And there'll be sensations that come out of that at the neck, in the jaw, the sensory organs. It's all up there, isn't it? So it's a pretty busy computer at the top. So sense your ability to inhale and to let go. Receiving and releasing. Yeah, let your head be wherever it's comfortable. Maybe you're on your side with your head, maybe you rolled so the back of your head is on the blankets instead of turning left. That might be a lot of arm stretch for some of us to be this way. So you can always put your arm on your side. Any side, it could be on the right side, it could be over down to the left arm. So a few more moments with the focus on the side beam of the right layers of the body. So if you're rolled onto your back a bit, this might be one where you want to come back over a little to the left hip so you can stay with that side. Even if it's a little vulnerable to be on its side space, this will be important what we're building. Arm can go over, arm can stay down. Couple more breaths. Eyes relaxed. Okay. So we've been in this shape for a bit, and I want you to feel when the patterns can continue in the side. So I know that we're going to shift our hinge of our hips to get up, right, to sitting. But I want you to kind of notice how the knees behave to get there. I mean, this is classic 101. What happened to my knee? What's going on with my posture? Not that anything happened to it, but just figuring out how you cycle your movement in the mid body. Okay, so roll to the left if you haven't already gotten up, and then come on up so that you have all your goodies. I think what you'll want is your props can stay the same. The only thing that might be an addition in the front will be that ball and your sand. So let's see, I think that's right. Double check. So I can put either a ball or a block under my left leg. I'm in a seated cross-legged pose. It's called easy pose, Sukhasana. And if I put a sandbag on the right upper leg, it's kind of helpful for my grounding, but I think it's helpful for my spine, like it grounds the spine base. Just anything. If you have two sandbags, that would be extra plush for this, because then you could really root your whole spine. I mean, you do have two sides. Okay, so I'm going to get a block. I guess if I had the best option, I'd have two blocks, so I'll get both. And I'll start with just the center, right? So you're centering your hairdo. Okay, you're centering things, and when you lean forwards, your legs crossing might slide a little bit. You might feel a tug at the knee. This will be a good one to get that kind of box shape of the knee to the hips. And then you lean forward with your blocks in tow, near your toes. And as you slide the weight of the blocks forward, pick up a signal in your back, in your hips. Kind of notice where the signaling is circulating in those areas. So it could feel pretty dense in your back, could be your hip right away. So one good thing about the sand on one side is that you'll probably identify with that hip the most, right? That the sand is on. There's positives. So when you lean forwards, door one is forward. I let the crown of my head shift. So I'm not pulling my jaw front, I'm letting my jaw soften. Option two is to start to slide the blocks to the left side. And it's about to 11 o'clock on the left. That's a pretty good angle, not farther over, so that you're feeling this side, right? The side that we worked with our sage pose, the right lane of travel through the intercostals. So let's say you can go to the left, but you want to kind of sink down, but you're a little bit concerned about your spine's care. So you might pull the blocks a little bit closer. You might find you can put your elbows on your blocks. Another thing you can do if you have another bolster, right? You can put that on top of the blocks. And then you have a very good support for your spine. And the blocks have another height, like they can go up, which is quite helpful for the circulation for me now in my back. It's not, even though rounded seems like, it's not ideal, right? You want to find extension from the spine. Simple. So some of us are left and some of us are forward, straight in front. Yeah, that could be something good for both those directions for your back and hip. You might even back up, come back to step one and sense your connection to that right leg. But keep in mind, if you go left, you're going to probably feel the side of the waist a bit more. Okay, so with a few more moments, breathing slow. And detect the circulation even in the knee. So if it feels kind of scratchy in the knee or you're uncertain about its protective value, then you might be changing things up in the next shape. So kind of tune into that. Come back up. This is the beginning position. And then we'll move a sandbag. So we're left with one on the left leg. And what you can do with this twist, we're going to take a twist to the right in a few moments, but I want you to prep your arms a bit. So let the left arm, when it comes up, you're going to turn the palm back and feel when your hand turns back that your elbow bends. And if you're capable of getting that flesh from the armpit, which is down, right? The armpit is down in this position. It's not completely turned up. Feel that flesh move towards the elbow and see if you can push the left hand back. I mean, it might be a little bit challenging for your shoulder, but feel when the hand comes down. So you're just hinge at the elbow joint, and then you try to get that elbow up. And be protective here. I don't want us to push with our right hand on this version, like force. So if you have trouble getting your elbow lift up, then you have your elbow here. It's okay. It doesn't have to be very high. It's kind of igniting this area in the back of the arm. Okay. Now hold on to the left shoulder with the hand. That's the only thing that's going to hold something. And circle the left elbow back. So you're kind of lifting. Mine is kind of semi-circling. It's not a perfect circle, but I'm just curious about shoulder, so I'm not going to force it to be some sort of diagram that I'm following. You just do the best you can with the shoulders here. And then let it go, and maybe you don't feel much in the shoulder, maybe there's a little bit of sizzle in there, but what we'll take is we're gonna move our twist to the right, as I mentioned. I'm just being careful that you have all your options, okay? So you can keep the ball, bring the left hand to the right knee and reach the right hand back and go there. And that's door one. Door two is you're going to move the ball away and you're going to cross the right leg over the left, reach the left elbow to the outside of the right leg and twist. Okay, so one might be a little bit more acceptable for the knee, the back, the hip than the other. So when you find the rotation to the right, try to let your sitting bones be kind of an accessory muscle right here, although that's not the truth of what they are, but you're trying to access your sitting bones to find that proper tune into both sitting upright. And finding upright, not uptight. So explore, and that could be kind of finding some humor in it, maybe feeling your body turn to the right, maybe hold the knee and come back forward. And then motion, circulation with breath. Just feel the corridor of the waist. If you want to get the elbow hooked to the leg, but the leg position is hurting your left knee, you can also straighten the left leg with or without sand. Okay, cross the right leg over it, and then take the twist there. So that's also pretty good. It feels different. I like it. It's a nice sense of reach for the leg. And so I want you to unwind, which is very close to the front, right? Turning back forward. And then if the crossing of the legs, however your habit is with that, bring both feet forward. So uncross to reach through the legs. Take the sand away. And then feel where the flex of the feet is in this position. I want you to take your belt and, kind of trim and properish with this one with your spine line. And if the back of your knees can't help it, but kind of drop down, then get a sandbag under them. I mean, it's worth your energy to put this together. Don't skimp out on helping out. For me, I feel like I need my sand lower than under my knees to keep my knees from dropping down. Don't skimp out on helping yourself out. There you go. So that's kind of an interesting calf set. And then I get my belt under my feet. You can swing it forward, reach it under your feet. And then pull the foot space. So you're pulling at the balls of the feet. So the roots of the toes, a little bit below. Pull, and I want you to really feel that connection through your skeleton to your feet. And measurably use your arm muscles, not trying to pull yourself to a forward bend, but sitting upright in staff pose. Okay, so if your big toes feel like they're merging, that's probably the right shape that we're steering towards. Okay, and feel your natural poise of your spine. Breathing. Now let go of the belt. Interlace your fingers and turn the hands inside out. Pasta pose. So we lift the arms up at the hands inside out. And we just get a feel of our seat down with the arch of the spine out of the back of the pelvis. Okay, bring your arms open. Good job. Feel the hands reach down and then slide off your bolster. Easy. And turn to your other side, Sage. So we're going to shift onto our right hip. So I'm going to encourage you to keep the blankets about the same as last side. So when you pivot, you feel where that leg on the left side, that's the top leg, has something under the inside of the leg. And then this waist is going to be, I think we got our props set up, right? Looks like we're close. Yep, the blanket's probably just something you kind of switch to the other side. If you did that extra blanket fold. And if there's concern, right, with your props, you can always unmute yourself and ask a question too. So just keep that in mind. Now with that left side reaching, the sand is pretty nice to have the quality of reach through this connected tissue without having to effort and like muscle my way into it. So I think there's this kind of quality in the restorative that I'm starting to explore is it's about using the props to hold the body in therapeutic shapes, right? So you wanting to access them in just the right measurements. So that just takes time to become a connoisseur of these shapes. It really is not a, first couple of years into it. It takes a little time. And in all the patterns here with this shape, with the side wall of the chest and into the chest tissue, it's a pretty lymphy space here. So if it's feeling too lymphatic or kind of sore and tender, then you might need to back off on it. And if it feels like you can go for it and let the arm reach, or even simply let the ribs reach, then that's going to be an advantage up into the armpit chest lymph as well. So it doesn't have to be your arm is fully moving back. If it hurts your shoulder, then you're not doing that. So find a place for the left arm. Anywhere is fine. It could even be in space, not necessarily touching down and grounding. And then filter the air in through the nostrils. It's the greatest humidifier, right? It's already installed. And out through the mouth. And if you find it productive for you to do breath instruction where it's fully focused with the nose, that's an option as well. It's really to each his own how that feels with your heart rate. I find I like to get my heart rate to really slow and relax. So breathing out of my mouth is a little more calming for me. So personalize it. And then if that left arm is kind of open, you'll feel how this arm movement affects your chest circulation and your lungs. So if it's down, that's okay. If it's up, if it's across, feel what's interesting for your position to inhabit the breath. Just be slow, patient, accepting. If anything hurts and doesn't feel right with the shape, upper, lower body, then change it. Maybe your knees need to be next door to each other. That can work. And if you haven't tried freeing up the left arm, even if your arm is needing to be down on the level of the shoulder, not overhead, you still might try moving the arm open to stretch the rib cage chest, right, to get the circulation benefit through these upper lungs. Okay, so feel how the waist turns. Now, this clearly takes some study to work with these two shape frames that we're doing today, and we kind of squished them in practice, but side sage to the seated pose. So when I start to move my sand away, and I bring the left knee towards the right and roll to the right side, come on up and take a seat, and you might inhabit this rounded shape initially, like you kind of curve down. So feel when you get the ball under your leg, the right leg, or the block. I'm going to sandbag on the left. If you're double sanding, find that the sand is really high up, so it's kind of it's hip hugging. And then as you lean forwards, getting your props, maybe 2 blocks. Maybe you got a bolster and you're going to put on top of your blocks as well. So if you have that set up, you can put the blocks in front, inside the mat. Actually, it could be in or outside the mat. That doesn't matter. Huh? That doesn't matter. Huh? If I have my block setting in front and it's similar spacing, I mean, you could change the height, probably not on each side. They have to be level. But when you're leaning forward, do you reach out of the rib cage, or do you kind of hinge at the hips and hope for the best? Or just doing practice, not knowing what's the best for you? Feel the movement of breath. And then notice on that empty, letting go, if the spine is feeling like it has this lift, this inner extension, or if it's really working on the side of kind of slacking. So they both have some positives. So you want to find what is at the central kind of spine channel where you feel like you're still reaching from your spine. Okay, and the neck is a player here with movements. Maybe you let your head nod a little side to side. If that's too much controlling, let your head release a bit. And I like to move the blocks to the right on this side so I get some of the side channel. And let the weight of that sand kind of rest on that left leg. I don't know if it has another option. You can feel how the movement of the ribs kind of playing with that dance of shifting side to side will affect the back muscles releasing. So that's kind of lateral work, working your sides to release your back. Now we're gonna start to move into that twist. So you can bring your blocks back to the front. Okay, and you find that centering pattern of the legs. So it really can be any way when you bring your hands to your legs and you take the sand to the right leg. And you might work with center and take a little turn, but that could be a lot. So if you're committing to the leg cross and you move the ball, left foot crosses over the right leg. And I'm working a bit with the pattern of kind of keeping my knees, my bottom leg open so that I have to keep my makes my base, my foundation is slightly challenging. It makes it challenging, but then I don't kind of collapse. So try to keep this growing. And then when you turn to your left, you can either put that right arm to work with holding the leg. You can place the arm so it reaches the leg and stretches through the shoulder piece. You know, but there's all these different, I hope you don't have a bunch of plates or pins, but you want to work with the connecting layer, because an arm getting put back together, right? You need to kind of feel like you're doing that in the process, like you're putting things back and arranging them so that they can regenerate. So if regenerating for you is to hold the leg with the hand and kind of baby the shoulder a little bit, stay with that. You're not trying to push into the arm. If a little bit of pressure allows you to feel the fun of the twist, because it is kind of flourishing. And then where in the spine do you feel the twist? Should be all mid-back, should be thoracic. And then the sacrum is really not a place you want to be twisting. It's really a joint of stability. So I want you to try to keep that frame from the very base of the spine, so it really stays plugged in here. This is one reason I'm using the knees pretty broad, is to keep my sacrum, that whole lower space, stable, so you don't have SI joint instability. So getting more basic is basically the operating experience here. So flow the belly with the breath. Feel the expansion. And as it comes back towards the spine, breathing slow. Now as you come back to the front, center yourself in the front zone. Take that experience of moving that left foot in front of the right knee. So you're in this simple cross-legged position again. But I want you to have that sand on the right leg. Okay, so you reach your right arm forward. Okay, it's because we're grounding down to the right leg. right palm turns back, and then as you, it's kind of a hooking position, but you're lifting, and you're probably lifting out of the right side of your waist a bit to get the arm to motion. So feel if you can have your left hand on your thigh and it's resting, and then gradually bending that right elbow to the point that you're touching towards the shoulder. And then you're trying to get the elbow to lift, like you're trying to get it to lift straight up. But, you know, it might be a while. It may not be a day or any time this year, but you know, you're working the mobility of the tricep. And then let that the right hand hold onto the shoulder and circle. So we're rotating, and it might get a little bit clunky in your shoulder. There might be zero clunk, but just feel what your rotation is on the side. Maybe it's capable of moving, but it feels different on the other side. You go both directions, or keep it with the up and out and back. I like that direction quite a bit. Okay. So with both of our arms having some kind of seasoning in them now, kind of rubbed around. Okay, you're going to take the sand away, and we're actually going to step back. So let's move our blankies. You might need to uncross, you might want to shake out the legs, but move the blankie top off, put it kind of out of your way a little bit to the back area inside, and then pull the one blanket in next to your bolster flat. Let's see where I am in screen. I think you can see me okay. I think I'm still in screen. I am. Now, whatever leg goes back first is up to you. Let's not be a decider on it that it needs to be left leg or right leg. Whatever you like to take back first. So take a leg back and then step back. See, you're going to end up here anyway. And position hands, knees without the bolster underneath your core. So you'll need to move the bolster away and front though so you can touch it. And then with the knees apart, the shoulders are warm in this position, right? It's kind of a muscular position for the shoulders. So if it's helpful for you when you stretch your shoulders this way to have something under your forehead like a sandbag or a block, use it. Regardless, I'm going to use something. It could be a blanket as well. And let your elbows bend. So they're not completely toned, they're soft. Okay. And then feel the knees apart, the feet maybe relaxing or the toes under, you choose. And then finding where the back shape feels in this fairly prone position. I mean, it's face downwards at least. Slide the hands in so they feel like they're maybe on the side of your head and down. If you had antenna, they'd be down from your antenna. Fingers stretch open and then come up to table. Okay. And then round your back to cat, chin in to chest. Inhale, arch the spine. Feel the hips flow back. Exhale, round your back. Feel the belly organs pull in and towards the spine, chin to chest. This is a real curious pattern, and you can be on hands, you can be on elbows, but work with this movement of the back. Instead of kind of squeezing the guts in like you're doing some contraction exercise, feel if you can get the movement of the back to help flow the back ribs and the shoulders across the back, but also to get the stomach organs, you know, they move and they grip and they flow in this position. So rather than pulling them, just let them move with the ebb and flow of the back muscles. Okay, and then let's come into up dog and down dog. Let's play with that. So get your mat kind of clear of blocks. Your bolster feels too close for comfort. Stretch your hands wide on your mat so your fingers turn out a little bit. And then flow the waist down and up to the chest. So there's an arch. Okay, and the arms are real toned. So when you push back and you toe under, lift your knees, and then just be curious on this alternating pattern. The most important part in my idea is that you take equal time for both up dog and down dog. So you're not prioritizing the timing in the down dog, which is usually classic. This seems to be like, I've got to get my dog pose down. But just keep it moving. So you're moving through the feet. If this is too much on your wrist, you might move your elbows down for a few moments and pause, or come back to child's pose if you need to in between. But let's take about, I think we're doing 6 to 8 on this one today for this cycle of movement in the core. And then play with how the waist is going to move in the last few times. So how the tone is when you move from up dog to table, and then back to dog pose. Okay. And then next time you come back to that table, you're going to reach your hips back. Just be careful of your knees, the pressure on them. So let the arms reach wide, your forehead touch down to the floor or a block. The hands are on the ground, not on the bolster. Okay. And then take the position of the hands sliding back. And then we're kind of moving right into this one by one. Then lift up the knees. And I want you to take your feet wide as your mat, so a pretty big stance. And then as you walk your hands back to the blanket, can you bend your knees? So it's kind of a half squat. It's not a super squat, but a half squat. Bend your knees and then let your hands hold the lower branches of the legs towards the ankle. So it's close on the base of the leg. As each hand holds each leg, the left hand's assigned to the left leg. You let your head kind of drain down and your elbows just gradually relax open. So let your head nod side to side. Head below heart. Yeah, if you get a little bit uncomfortable with your balance on this or blood pressure shift, so first, don't come up quickly. Second, hold on to the legs so you have a little bit more support through your structure to stay steady. And then when you're feeling the weight of your head lower down, let your knees bend. Feel the back open. Let your head nod. Okay, let's let the hips feel a little shift back. Okay, and then drain the arms out. So I like holding the elbows so that as that creates traction for my shoulders. And if the feet stance this wide is making this less of a stretch for you on the back of your legs, that's the focus. I mean, you might still feel the leg stretching, but for some of us, it might lose that intensity. And the idea is to get the inversion, so that circulation to the brain. Not so much the focus on the legs, but the blood flow to the brain, the heart, the top of the spine. Okay, then feel how you kind of scoot your feet a little closer, kind of play with that balance. Start to bring them closer in so your legs might be closer to your rib cage, right, in touching modality. And then feel that lowering of the brain. Head hangs. Okay, take that final moment of uncrossing, crossing the other way with the arms, and then feeling where your neck can fully unwind here. And yet turn the other way. Now, as you lower the arms, well, my hands don't always come down that quickly in this pose, so you might find that when you transfer your weight now back to your hands in front, you're gonna trust the balance of your feet. So I would let your hips feel really, really high. So really lift your rear and then use your hands to move out wide. And then lower down on the knees and reach for your bolster. Let's take the bolster straight in front so it's lengthwise. And then go ahead and lie on the bolster with your core and see if you can steady your circulation through your back muscles by finding the hands on the ground, but no wrist pressure. I mean, there'll be minor wrist touchdown, but feel the fingers open in locust and lift up your head just enough to feel that lower back concentration. Now, if the word strain is what you would insert in there, then you're doing a little too much. So you might put your hands forward in Sphinx pose, your elbows down, and be here. So that could be your pose of choice. But you could also have it where your hands are back. This doesn't mean you're better, or you have it in an improved state of spine, and you lift up and the hands hover. So that's your other choice. So I think I like Sphinx pose better, even though maybe my mind senses the other one's advanced, but this feels better in my back. So we're getting a little bit of a baby back bend in. So either you're here and your hands are up, or you're very lightly touching the ground, shoulders back, or your elbows are down for a few more seconds. Now feel how the back has to go closer, right, to the center line, right? It has to kind of knit in together. And then lower down your head. Maybe that doesn't change the back pressure as much, but when you slide back and you bring your knees closer together, okay, they get close enough. And then when you lift up, see if you can lengthen through your core. And as you come back through your knees, you're going to step the right foot to the top corner and stretch the left thigh. And I would be purposeful on getting the bolster under your leg so that your knee is not pushing on the floor so deeply. So you might have to work this for a moment to get your left quadricep, the front of the thigh, to lengthen, but also you want to be a little careful of the right knee, not over your toes, right? So your foot can turn out, but be cautious on all things knees, okay? So pattern, we're going to do just a couple more of these upright patterns, and then we're going to go to a full inversion cycle. Seems like the transitional phase here with this quadricep awareness right now is to maybe, feel the reach of the front of the left hip flexor. And then when you transition to the other side, feel the back muscles maybe a little bit rounded. And then feel when you step out with the other leg, you'll let your body weight maybe lean into it, and maybe that's too aggressive. So it's interesting to kind of find out what would be helping you to release the tensions in those spaces. Maybe the aggressive push is too much. So you might have to find a way to be on the bolster with your right leg. So you're kind of teasing those tissues in the front of the leg. It's kind of interesting to work with that. Just tease the tissues along. Left foot is turned out for most of us. Knee is just above the ankle. Hands might be the place where you have to work a bit with maybe turning them a little out, just taking some care for the wrists. They're fairly important to your life. Now let the right leg stay heavy behind you. I think we're on left foot out. So when we shift back, we're going to turn the bolster across. And you walk your left foot, or whatever your front foot is, across your mat towards the other side. And then when you take a seat, I want you to actually reach your back leg forward and then take the blocks to the sides of the bolster, the blanket pushed back, and then lower down on your back with your head on your blanket. And you'll use the blanket today for this one for your head. And but when the knees are drawing in, we're going to do upward facing forward bend. So, we just did a forward bend. So this is just the supine version. So let the legs have their lift and feel them tilt back. So oftentimes the adjustment on this one, the self-adjustment, is to put a blanket here on your belly. You kind of have to squish it. Feels like a sandbag would be ideal, but that's kind of cruel to do. So I won't do that with my core pressure, but it'd be a good massage. But you're trying to steer in this kind of restorative version of upward facing forward bend, so it's not cloud pose. But we're getting the back lane of travel on the legs. I want you to take the legs so they're a little separated. It's not a huge separation, but it feels like they're kind of hanging. So you find that fulcrum of balance point with the knees softening. And let that kind of accumulate for a few more seconds before we add sand to the feet. I know that looks like it could be a little dangerous if you put your sand there with your legs like this, huh? We'll find a good way to do it. And now if the sandbag, the blanket is kind of making you feel stuffed, that's the idea, is it makes your belly stuffed. This is another way to stuff your belly. Just put a blanket on it and put your knees towards your chest. Okay, now with all that circulation pressure, dynamic to the heart, you're going to move anything off of your core, if you even use that. Get a sandbag or a bag of weight that you might have around the house. And let's put that on our feet. So we're going to bend through and then lift up and slide the sand over to the bottoms of the feet. And then when you lift up through the legs, try to push up into your sand for a moment and notice if your legs can actually tolerate that lift. I think it's kind of interesting to work after all these forward bend moments. The lunges were forward bends as much as the two legs under you. Now that they're up, try to lift up into them and flex the feet or keep the feet neutral. Feel what the difference is for your legs. And then move your elbows open and hands back, cactus. Okay. So I guess the definition of this one, Viparita Karani with cactus, so it would be cactus waterfall, I guess, would be your translation for all those poses. Don't know if they hang out together often, but pretty unusual, huh? So you feel a little space at the feet, little tiny bit, and you feel the weight into your back pelvis. And reverse that gravitational flow through the organs, resting the organs from their downward daily pull. So even if we ended class on this, it would be a good sequencing, right, of circulation events. We'll do a little more, but I want you just to notice if you spent a little more time in less poses, you might gravitate towards a felt sense of inner balance. The legs might shift forward, they might shift back. So feel where your central connection is through the legs. And then the belly progressively moves with each breath. An alternating pulse of in and out breath. Very good. Now relaxing the face. Start to bring those legs so that they feel as if they're slightly forwards. Challenging the core. And now we'll bend the knees. So we spent a good amount of time in that cactus waterfall today. And then when you move your sand away, let's bring the sand to the top of the thigh so that we get this version of bridge pose. So my legs straight down, sand at the top of the thighs. Yeah, the blanket works out fine for this, but not everybody will want to keep their blanket under your head. You have a choice to move it or keep it. Okay, I want you to feel those front of the hip bones and the awareness in that length. I know the back is arched, so the channel of this is a little bit like your lunge where you have that quadricep lengthening. Of course, it's a different, physicality here, but it's a similar mentality for the legs, though. Leg mentality. Now, slide the sand away, but, kind of keep those legs in that stretch position. And then as you reach down through your heels, you're going to bring your knees to bending, but keep the feet pretty far down, versus trying to pull them all the way up and grip the full hip. And then push down into your feet, lift up your hips just a little bit and slide your bolster down to your ankles. And then slide the bolster down further as your feet lift up on top of the bolster. Lift up your hips towards the ceiling to let the spine strengthen and then lower the spine down, okay? So I want you to get a feeling of these alternating motions. Lift the arms this time, then gradually magnify the lift of the hips. Okay, now as you move your arms back, you might notice, I get so high on my back, but you're kind of on the brink of, do you want your blanket or not, probably in that moment. Do you choose? Let's take a few more bridge poses. And when you're lifting and kind of mounting to the fullness of the pose, take that extra moment where you are in the middle of the intensity of the bridge pose, where the glute muscles, the rear is gripped up, and lift and lift and lift your hips until you maximize it. Your arms don't have to go overhead, but most people want to have purpose with the arms. But even if my arms are down and I turn my palms open and really work on the concentration of circulation depth in my shoulders, this is it's a shoulder stand preparation. So it's a shoulder strengthener, right? So you might work your bridge pose with some of this upper back pressure. You just kind of feel that. And then lower your spine down. And let's take our stuff on the right side of your mat, just kind of move it a little bit away. And then push your bolster after your spine is down over to the right side of your mat and cross the left leg over to the bolster. Keep it real simple. Like you know where you're going with the hip. It's directing over, and then the ball goes to the sacrum, and then the sand goes on the outer left leg. Get a full focus. Sand is on the leg. Maybe you add your blanket back under your head if you did move it. Feels a little bit too far back without it. Up to you. Left arm open, cross the left leg to the right, come into the experience of length in the hip. If that is even a felt sense of length in a hip. Yeah, head might turn left. Breathing slow. Enjoy the movement of the rib cage. And I keep it simple that the bottom leg is going to bend a little bit. So you can kind of feel if your bottom leg is hooked and bending, as if you're trying to move your right foot up a little bit, but be very cautious of the knee pressure. So that just creates a little bit more movement in your left hip when your bottom leg bends. Now, make a little bit of concentration in that left hip. Maybe you touch to the sand and encourage that to go across to the right. And your sand is not going to magically levitate, but as you slide it off the leg, take some care before the second side to move the ball and move the knees in, but let the back of the legs kind of, swing. So there's no real pressure in the knee. You just let the legs hinge up and then take in the bolster to the left side of your mat and use the support of your right leg to cross to the left side over the bolster. And you might have your little habits of, you get on your back, you kind of roll your left hip before your right hip crosses. So sense those ways of organizing. Just notice what you do to create support. And the sand might be welcome on this side. You might find that you would prefer no sand on one side. And whatever the choice, go into the second side, cross over. So it's a hip crossover twist. And that twist is occurring in the mid back. Right? So that ball is supporting the sacrum through using that, keeps it stable. And I try to really push it in so I feel like it's not rolling out, it's just stuck. And then you turn your head to the right and come into the shape for the moments of breathing slow. And feel the practice in the lower branches of our spine roots into our pelvis. Really try to connect there, which might lead you on a way of bending your bottom leg. And just be sensitive to the knees and the back. And where you feel the movement of the head and neck come back to center, and the sand, as you shift that away, I want you to take the moment here to take the ball out and then start to move your knees back in. But when you do roll up to get your bolster height, I want you to use that back reach. So try to let your knees hug in, hold the back of the legs, and then pull the legs towards you as you inhale and exhale, roll up. And then if it feels like, oh, I got it, or maybe you had a little more to go, then accepting where you're at and get some blocks so they're second setting. And you want to find that the block height is sufficient. So if you've got long legs, you can maybe put your blocks to the next height. Just, it really is something you have to practice and try and see what works out for you. Because getting the legs higher is ideal. The higher I can get them, the more benefit, the more calm for my nervous system by getting my legs up, the calmer for my back. Okay, so many of us have pretty good backs in this group. That hasn't been a complaint, right? As much as knee or shoulder. So I've heard more knee, shoulder, not as many hip and back, but we can talk about that another time, huh? Another group talk. But as we lower down our spine and we get a feel of how we use our blanket or not under your head, you don't have to. You could use 2 blankets under the legs and get the legs even higher. So it's really dependent on how you want to work your support to your brain stem. But as your head is let go, you feel where your hands can relax, maybe a sandbag on your core, maybe sand free in the moment, arms relaxing downwards. Can you bring the arms downwards and the shoulders gradually relaxing back? And then as the breath centers through the belly button and expands, belly button expansion, and then relaxes, soothing and toning in the organs. Continuing to relax the legs and their weight. And is there even weight from one hip to the other, one side of the spine to the other, and one shoulder to the other? And then breathe wide in the front of the body, in the chest, making more space with the breath. A full circle practice, back to the space with the breath. You know, as we let the feet maybe circle, feel that opportunity of most of the body is in a quieting perspective, and one part maybe kind of rustles and moves. Feel the movement of the feet. Go both directions. And then with the feet relaxed and the weight of the hips heavy, start to hinge at the hips. So that could be a little interesting for you when you slide your calves on the blanket. If you've got sand on your shins, that will be a different opportunity for you to move that away. But here, when I start to scoot my feet on the blanket, the knees are going to point to you. And then feel if you can reach to the back of the legs, then draw the legs towards you. So the back is invited to open up. Although the back travel is probably more like length for most of us versus outwards, like the ribs. But with those 2 options, you're going to roll to the side and let your hands bring you up so we can find this, talk about creating space. We're having this kind of shared experience. So coming on up to sitting on your blanket and Feeling if the legs want to be starting in this diamond shape. No, we're not starting again, but this diamond shape like we started, or cross-legged in the other direction that you're familiar with all the time. And then feel where the spine has that lift and an arch in the ribs and the spine, and the hands guiding together, and find that common connection of awareness, of practice in each of our spaces, and then closing the practice together with a breath and perhaps a dedication, having a dedication in your practice to something. Inhale together and exhale.